through the streets of Soho in the rain. He was looking for the place called Lee Ho Fooks. Gonna get a big dish of beef chow mein. Ah, ooh, where was London?
So what happened to Eddie Felsen?
Evidently, he sold liquor for 25 years.
Yeah, and was quite successful at it, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. So
welcome to Deep Focus.
we're continuing our conversation. So we just
Part 2.
just finished up The Hustler. Now we're on to its sequel, The Color of Money, celebrating its 35th anniversary, right?
Yeah, so coincidentally, both films have nice round numbers for their anniversaries
Right,
this
that's,
year.
that's part of what inspired my thought. We can try to bang these out before the end of 2021.
Yeah.
So The Color of Money, actually, I saw a little bit of it on TV prior to The Hustler. And I remember when I saw The Hustler, because I watched that, I was probably about 13 or 14 when I saw The Hustler the first time. And I remember thinking, oh, there's a Paul Newman movie about pool. I think it's called The Color of Money. And my mom's like, oh, that has nothing to do with The Hustler. Years later, I watched it and I saw that it was actually a sequel. And I was like, oh, man, I was right. I knew he played the same character.
Damn. Childcare.
Interesting movie.
Very interesting movie.
Directed by Martin Scorsese, which I bet you, I mean, Scorsese fans will know that, but I bet you your typical movie person doesn't.
Yeah, it's kind of considered to be lesser Scorsese. I
Yeah.
think that's the general consensus on this, and it's a very entertaining movie. It's a fun movie. It feels very removed from The Hustler. I mean, not just because it was made so many years later, but even the character of Eddie Felsen feels like a different character to a point. Granted, he has a lot of life. He's lived between the two storylines, but it does feel like a spiritual successor, but not necessarily a sequel in the traditional sense.
All right, let's talk about that, because I've heard a lot of people say that.
Yeah.
This is the only Scorsese film, by the way, that get 2 thumbs down from Siskel and Ebert.
Although it might sound like a sequel to The Hustler, The Color of Money is actually more like another chapter in the continuing story of Fast Eddie Felsen's obsession with the game of pool.
This is a film, I was trying to think about it. Let's imagine, so it's obviously a kind of almost like an intergenerational passing of the torch, right? Paul Newman was this big, larger-than-life movie star and actor, and he was really the initiative, that the driving force behind this. Initiated it, hired Scorsese, brought him in to make the film, and they came up with the idea of the young pool player. It's technically based on a novel by Walter Tevis, but it has absolutely nothing to do with it. The only thing it keeps in common is the title and the character of Eddie Felsen. The whole story is completely different, and this Vince character played by Tom Cruise was created basically as a sense of, I think, one generation superstar and the upcoming superstar, right?
So it's like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, basically.
So let's imagine, so again, it's made 25 years after The Hustler. So we are in 2021, 25 years removed from Jerry Maguire. So let's suppose there's Jerry Maguire Part 2, right?
Please no.
But let's just suppose, right, that Tom Cruise says, hey, I want to go back and revisit this character. It's one of my more famous performances. I was nominated for an Oscar. How would this movie be made as a sequel today? Well, I would imagine that you would have all sorts of, ooh, I recognize that, I know that moments in it, right? There'd be something where like they bring back in a character that maybe it's bringing Cuba Gooding Jr. back as Rod Tidwell. Maybe it's bringing Jay Moore back as the annoying person that we saw before. And it would be all about a nostalgia trip. This film is a true sequel in the sense that it's not that. I think it's a very honest sense of where would a person's life go 25 years removed. There's no reason to necessarily think Eddie Felsen at the end of The Hustler is going to be in contact with anybody from that movie, right? And they tried to try to milk a connection into Minnesota Fats, and they decided against it.
Yeah, I think when Jackie
Gleason
Gleason
said no,
turned it down, yeah.
they ultimately, I think, felt like it wasn't working, and so everybody just agreed, let's not try to force it, right?
Yeah.
And there really is no reason why Minnesota Fats appears there, right? They played pool together in the early 60s. Why would they get together and talk to one another?
Yeah, I mean, we should just set up the general premise that, Eddie Felsen his attention is caught by the young upstart Tom Cruise.
Come on the snap, Vincent.
That kid's got a sledgehammer break.
So he sees Vince, he's obviously a very, very talented pool player, and decides that this is kind of his ticket back into that world, right? And this is the world that he left at the end of The Hustler and never thought he'd come back to, and this is his chance to kind of reclaim that glory that he left so many years ago. And in a way, he kind of takes on the role of Bert in The Hustler.
Kind of.
Yeah, in the sense of, he's staking Tom Cruise, not in terms of his character.
Well, he kind of isn't, right? Because, I mean, I think...
He's not as overtly devious, but...
For sure.
Yeah.
I think, because I don't know if it's obvious to Eddie even why he's intrigued by Vince right away. And I think that's part of what the film's about, him figuring out what's drawn him back here. He's seen something.
Yeah, he sees himself in him, I think. He sees the potential that he once had. But, Vince is much more hot-headed than Paul
Cruise
Newman's
dials
character.
is up to 11, right?
Oh, man.
Victory.
And his hair is dialed up to 11
Full
as well.
80s here, baby.
That is quite the coif he has going there. But it's an interesting relationship the two of them develop. And basically, he takes him on the road, right? He convinces him to go on the road. And Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio is his girlfriend.
Who's really kind of conning him, right? The great scene early on when...
She's kind of the brains of the operation, right? Yeah.
Well, we even learned that the way they met was that previously she and her ex-boyfriend before Vince were robbing his house. And
His mother's house.
Yeah,
right?
his mother's house. And she even has the stolen jewelry from his mother that she's wearing, and Vince doesn't even realize it's the stolen jewelry.
See this? Oh. Vincent's mother's.
He gave that to you.
From the robbery. Vince says his mother has one just like it. He's sweet.
Either that or he just ignores it because he likes her so much, but he probably doesn't realize it.
I don't see any reason to think he knows it.
Yeah, so he's not the brightest bulb at times, as evidenced, by various scenes where Paul Newman is trying to show him how to hustle, and he can't resist winning, right, in very showy fashion. So, I was thinking to myself, like, what is it about this film that makes it kind of a lesser Scorsese film, right? And I do think it's a good film. I like the film. I enjoy it. Mm-hmm. But it's not one of his great pictures, right? And I wouldn't go so far as to give it a thumbs down like Siskel and Ebert.
I want to get into the other reason why I didn't like the movie, and I was shocked because he's one of my favorite directors, too.
But I think what I realized watching it this time was that this film really has no ebb and flow in terms of the emotions of the events on screen. People are yelling at each other pretty much constantly throughout this picture, right? Like, every single pool incident, something goes horribly awry, somebody runs off, or somebody gets into a verbal altercation, and the film is always at this kind of heightened emotional level throughout most of the entire picture, and it becomes kind of exhausting. That really struck me this time. I don't know if you ever noticed that.
I don't feel that way as I watch it, although I can understand that response, right? I would agree it's low-grade Scorsese. But as I often say, low-grade Scorsese is better than pretty much what everybody else is doing. Right?
It's still a very skillfully made. Michael Bauhaus' cinematography, very impressive.
Thelma Schoonmaker's editing.
Well, I do have some issues with her editing here, actually. She's a brilliant editor, don't get me wrong, but there are some really clumsy, awkward edits in this movie, I think. One that really stands out is that really awkward shot that freeze frames on Paul Newman, like jumping out of the pool.
No. That's brilliant.
That it goes to him like getting an eye exam. I don't know. I laugh every time that happens for some reason.
I can understand that it feels a little clumsy, but I think this is part of why I would say, while it is maybe low-grade Scorsese, it is nonetheless, I think, very clearly more than what a lot of people say this film is, right? because those are the touches that you see that Scorsese can't help but be creative, right? And be able to introduce something unique into what's really meant to be just a commercial project. This was his, he had the flop of the King of Comedy. He needs to get back in good graces, make a movie that can come in on budget and come in and perform well at the box office, right? That's what he sets out to do. He does achieve that, but in the process, he has these flourishes that I think any other director would have left. So that scene, takes place fairly late in the film, right, with Newman kind of diving into the pool and then coming out, it's a baptism, right? I mean, he's infusing all this religious imagery from his own Catholic upbringing, right? I mean, how they introduce at that moment when he's doing the eye exam and he gets his glasses to be able to have his vision again. They introduce the Verdi piece from the Nabucco opera.
Better? Same? Worse? Better. Better? Same? Worse?
No other director's doing that in a film like this. And so those are the things that make this film, I think, fascinating. Even though it is, like you said, lower grade Scorsese, it's still better than almost what anybody else would do.
Yeah, it definitely has, creative flair to it, and that's what we expect from Scorsese, and he does deliver that here. I mean, we talked about how The Hustler isn't very fascinated with the mechanics of the pool game. Well, this film is very much interested in that.
I noticed that this time. I hadn't really, when I watched them so close to each other.
Yeah, it takes the time to really show, the setups and the payoffs in terms of the shots, and it has almost a fetishistic quality to some of the pool photography, right? There's some really interesting kind of use of macro lenses and following the balls on the table, and so there's some real craft here that's very, very impressive. And again, these are situations where it's a static room and it's people standing around watching a game, right? And it's like, how do we make that interesting visually? And Scorsese is very aware of that challenge and takes it on here effectively, I think.
I think it's interesting because this is very much of the 80s too, right? Just like...
It's very dated. That really struck me this time around too, especially the music.
Yeah, I mean, some of the music obviously is very much, it's stuff that didn't last. I mean,
but even the score,
and
immediately dates the picture. Yeah,
Robbie Robertson's score. There's a couple touches that are some nice bits in it, but for the most part, I agree. The opening title music and the closing title music's not great.
Yeah.
But I do think that even though it's very much of the 80s, that actually kind of works to its advantage. It's not the 80s that is right now, like on Stranger Things or something. It's the 80s as they really were, which is kind of fun to see. For all those who have their love of the 80s, like watch this movie, you'll see what it really was like. But I think that what I like about the fact that it's of that era and it very clearly captures that era is that it's capturing kind of where Pool went and where Eddie would have gone, right? Pool became something else. Maybe people don't really pay that much attention to the sport. I mean, the first film, they're playing straight pool, which is an extremely long and very difficult game and requires incredible skill. 9 balls what they're playing in this one, which is not that. I mean, there's even that nice scene where Eddie's explaining that.
Straight pool, you gotta be a real surgeon to get over. It's all finesse. Now everything is 9 ball because it's fast. Good for TV, good for loud break shot. Oh well, what the hell? Checker sells more than chess.
Well, it's a faster game for a faster time, right? That's
and for TV,
idea.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is. Like TV was not a thing that you wouldn't have been watching pool on TV in the 60s. You were in the 80s. I think the film captures the fact that things had changed, right? And it really captures where things would have been at for this man's life. The film is kind of clunky. There are some weird transitions in it. There are some edits, like you said, that don't quite work. There's some edits that really do work well.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a grab bag on that. But what I think it gets great is the character of Eddie Felson. And I think it's a fascinating decision of where they took it, right? The sense that, like I said, he does kind of become Burt Gordon. And he is really trying to make Vincent into something else, right? If we look at where he was in the first film, and that scene with Sarah, and they're talking about the love of pool, right? That's who Vincent really is. He just loves the game and wants to play, even when he's playing John Turturro.
Oh, come on, one more game here. I'm bust. So let's just play. What? Let's just play for play, man, no money. Play? Show me what you got here.
Vincent.
Hey, Julian, I just want your best game.
He's willing to keep playing him without money, which makes zero sense. You can see that Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio is completely uninterested in that, right? And even Eddie reacts to it like, what the hell are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
You're a hustler. You're supposed to make money. Don't play him without money. And so Eddie, in a certain sense, does take on, or start to take on, the corrupting role of Bert, right? And actually succeeds.
You're some piece of work.
I'm some piece of work.
You're also a natural character.
I've been telling her that. You know, I got natural character.
Look, that's not what I said, kid. I said you are a natural character. You're an incredible flake. But that's a gift. See, guys spend half their lives trying to invent something like that. You walk into a pool room with that go, the guys will be killing each other trying to get to you.
Like, that's the thing. At the end, we realize he has succeeded in that because, we find that Vince will throw a game, right, and will hustle instead of just playing the best pool. And Eddie, through this whole arc, actually has a redemption where he gets back to who he was, of that man that wants to play the game just to play the game and to really appreciate the game. So I see that as a really interesting way of picking up where it was and where this guy probably went after 25 years, not being able to play anymore, having to figure out how to make a living, going down a different road, but still having something from that past that he wants to redeem. And I think this film's ultimately a redemption film.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how the film does take his character full circle in that regard, but I do feel like it misses out on some of the morality of what's going on. The fact that he teaches Tom Cruise how to hustle and eventually gets hustled by Tom Cruise, right? And he doesn't seem disturbed by the fact that he taught him how to be a better liar or how to deceive better. He seems more disturbed that he got conned, that he got played.
Are you sure you don't want in on this? We're talking about a lot of money.
Yeah, maybe.
And I guess that has its own kind of transformative quality to it, that it forces him to just focus on the game and his love of the game versus trying to make money or trying to deceive people. But there's even that moment where his girlfriend in the film talks about him having character.
It's nice.
I'm a real big fan of character in people. I don't know if you knew that about me.
Character.
Which I think is a direct reference to The Hustler.
Yes.
But it's not really expanded upon. It's almost like paying lip service to The Hustler. And that's I wanted more of that in this film. And there's even a moment, too, where Eddie flat out says, that was my past, those are events, those things happened a long time ago, and they don't really mean anything anymore, is kind of what he's implying.
I quit. Actually, somebody retired me. Sometimes you get in with the wrong kind of people, But hey, that was a long time ago. Back east, dead and buried, I don't even think about it. Or won my share of medals.
But I think that's the thing he's been saying to himself, right?
Maybe,
because that's fairly early on when they're just getting on the road.
It almost seems like, though, the film is telling us, like, kind of forget about what happened before. This is a new story. And the film seems very concerned about distancing itself from the original picture, from The Hustler. I feel like there were some parallels that could have been really emphasized here that were left by the wayside.
Well, see, I'll disagree with that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's trying to distance itself from The Hustler, but I also don't think it's trying... This is why I was making the point with the analogy on Jerry Maguire. It's not trying to replicate The Hustler.
Well, I don't feel like it has to replicate it. I don't feel like it needs, a cameo from Jackie Gleason, or it needs all these things that we recognize. But thematically, I felt that there were some missed opportunities here.
Yeah, I guess I'll push back on that, too, because I think that it's really, a lot of it's in Eddie's head, and the film's trying to visualize it. Especially, I'm thinking of the scene where Vince, they go on the road, and he's trying to teach him. He's trying to get him to learn how to lose and how to lose well. But that scene where Vince is finally playing a really good guy, who's like the key guy for them to try to have him lose to, so that when they get to the Atlantic City for that tournament, that to me is not just cool filmmaking, but it's really visualizing for us the transformation taking place in Eddie, and almost like Eddie's revealing to himself. Because I think you go back to that first scene when Eddie sees Vincent or realizes Vincent's there for the very first time. He is drawn to him for more than the fact that he sees a possibility of making money. That's what he thinks, because that's what he's had to make peace with, because I'll never be able to play pool again. And he accepted that fate, and he's gone on this different road. But I think he actually sees the possibility of regaining something of the joy he had in that game. And that's what the film's ultimately about, is him rediscovering that. And that's ultimately why the film ends the way it does. It's funny because that's one of the things people talk about, this is such a conventional film. But it subverts conventions all the time. And even the ending is a very big subversion.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, a lot of people would say it's anticlimactic, right? Insofar as you're expecting the big final match to play out, and it really never does, right? I mean, the film ends before we see the match play out. And the match, at the end of the day, is kind of immaterial. It doesn't really matter what happens there. It's more about, again, Eddie reclaiming that passion for playing pool. And I think that's a fine arc. I think that's okay. But I feel like there's a certain level of depth to what he's gone through that kind of gets brushed aside. So that pivotal scene where he's being hustled by Forrest Whitaker, it's a scene where he's completely devastated and heartbroken at the end of it. And again, I just get the sense that he's disappointed he was conned. That's why he's disappointed.
I don't know if that's quite it, because he realizes the con's happening, but he keeps going anyway.
Yeah, but it seems to be a sense of personal disappointment, insofar as he sees himself as the ultimate hustler, so now he's being hustled, and he's really lost his touch ultimately, right?
I think that's not what's taking place at that point in the story, right? Because that's following on the fact, like, Vincent actually doesn't do what he wants him to do. Vincent starts winning games when he tells him, don't, this is the thing, we have a golden opportunity here, so lose to this guy. And then he comes and he asks for the balabushka, right? The awesome pool cue.
No. Can I have the balabushka?
Yeah. Are you gonna play, Eddie?
Yeah, maybe.
Where?
I don't know, Gunner's?
Gunner's. Can we go with you?
No, it's okay.
You're not mad at me, are you? Last night?
No, you've done good.
And you expect him to be upset, right? I mean, because that's what you've seen before. And I think that's part of it. Yes, you see maybe a repeating of the scene, driving away from Vincent and all those different things that he's happened before, right? But this time, he isn't upset with Vincent, because something he saw there was a joy, and he wanted to just love the pool game again. He goes and he just plays, right? And yeah, you're gambling because that's what's taking place. You just kind of always bet on the game you're playing with somebody in a pool hall. When he goes to it, he's not really trying to hustle anybody. He's just playing games. He's just liking it. And then Vince even shows up, right? And they're talking, and he says, "Yeah, I'm doing pretty good for an old man, right? And just keep my own, right?" And he's talking, especially the way it starts with him and Forrest Whitaker's character. It starts with just what seems like a perfectly natural conversation. He's just enjoying a good time playing game, playing the pool, and having a conversation with the guy, and realizing that all of a sudden this guy's corrupting this thing that he's come to kind of love again. That's I think what he's mourning there. It's more of the fact that, oh crap, this guy introduced this hustle back into the thing that I kind of was just getting back to its purity again. And that's why I see because following upon that's when that baptism takes place, right? As he's retraining, re-equipping himself, learning again how to play pool.
At that point, I can see that, right? I can see that he's wanting to kind of return to the purity of the game and mastering the game. But I don't know.
Well, that's his art, right? Because he does start with, I want it to be the hustle.
But it just seems a little thin to me. It just seems a little thin. That's the final stop the end of the line is that after everything he's been through, right? I mean, it's better than where he started, I guess, right? It's better than nothing, but I just feel like it's a missed opportunity to have a little more just moral complexity in terms of what he's been doing with his life, what he's been doing with Tom Cruise, and what he's been showing him to do. All that seems to be kind of glossed over and ignored because he's happy now. And he's back to playing pool.
Is it ignored, or is it the fact that it just doesn't try to resolve it and explain it to all of us? Because I think it's all there. And I think you as the audience can watch these different scenes and you can explore that reality. And
maybe it is.
I think it's a complicated. I think Eddie retains the complicated nature of him in the first film.
And I'm not expecting everything to be just spelled out for me, right? But I do think Scorsese just glosses over some of that depth and is just a little more engaged with, again, the mechanics of the pool game itself and making that appealing to us as the audience so we understand why it's appealing to Eddie. That's one of the reasons why I think it's just not a great film is it doesn't get into those more gritty, thematic questions like The Hustler does. So this is really more of a film of pure entertainment.
It's a commercial film, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's right. So its purpose was to be entertainment, and
that's fine.
Yeah.
I think it's effective in that regard, despite the fact that, again, I do feel like it's at too much of an emotional crescendo at most points in the film. But it's something that maybe that's more a fault with the screenplay. I think the direction is fine. I think the direction's very, very
so
good.
Richard Price wrote the screenplay, obviously very famous writer, very accomplished writer. But I think you're right in a certain sense that the crescendo is there in the scripting.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's there in the performances, though. I mean, Paul Newman, while he plays exacerbation, he doesn't play it the way with explosions, right? If there's anything, the crescendo maybe is just coming from how over the top Tom Cruise is, and that gives the appearance of the crescendo.
That could be a lot of it.
But I think if you look at Newman's performance, which we should note he did win the Oscar for this. Some people think of it as kind of a makeup Oscar.
Like Scorsese for The Departed.
Right, and maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I mean, who cares? But I do think this is actually a fairly good performance from Newman. I don't think it's as good as his work in The Hustler. But he does, nonetheless, I think, bring his usual level of understatement. That's one of the real hallmarks of Newman as an actor, is how understated he is. And the way, like the point you made about how, I got retired 25 years ago. When I see that scene, I don't see him being like, don't pay attention to this. I think it's almost him burying deep, like there's a hurt here. There's
a defense mechanism.
It's, it's me playing it cool. Right, and you can even see just like the way when he's kind of getting excited, and they're going to go back into the pool room, and then it's not; it's just a warehouse.
Yeah,
and
that is a nice beat.
Yeah, well, and yes, there's a comedy to it, and there's humor, and you can laugh a little bit in the audience. But if you watch Newman's performance, he plays that thing so well. I mean, the look of disappointment, the look of embarrassment, just the way when they're walking on the street afterwards and they're all razzing him.
Good thing I didn't bring the Balabushka, huh? 60%? Are we going to divvy this up in a car? Enough.
It's the way a person would be in that moment, and that's just beautiful acting.
Yeah.
And it's why he's a legend, right? It's why he's one of the greatest actors the cinema's ever had.
Yeah, I mean, he has a great presence in this movie for sure. And
man, he rocks the sweater vest.
Absolutely. And those glasses, the tints are pretty strong there. But it's...
You can't even make a mustache work. I mean, the guy's awesome.
Human moves, kid. You study the watch, but I study you. You get the check.
Well, we should talk about the other performances, too. I mean, we touched on Tom Cruise, but...
It's Newman's film, but there's very important supporting roles, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Tom Cruise is very much the...
He wasn't a superstar quite yet. He was becoming one. Risky Business had been out. This came out the same year as Top Gun, but they obviously made it before Top Gun was released.
I mean, he's in full high-octane Tom Cruise mode in this picture, right? I mean, he's just like firing on all cylinders. The Saturday Night Live skits you see of Tom Cruise, are pretty much inspired by this.
There's a straight line from this performance to him jumping on Oprah's couch.
I've never seen you like that!
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sequel to this for sure.
Yes.
But, I mean, he's very charismatic. He's very watchable, right? He's very entertaining.
And he dedicated himself to this performance. I mean, he supposedly practiced, he bought a pool table and practiced for 10 hours a day, supposedly.
And he's very convincing. Like, and he does do some of his own pool shots in this film. And at no point do you feel like, you know, he's not giving a convincing performance. He really goes all in here. And it's a very physical performance too. I mean, especially that scene where he's like dancing around the pool table and he's using the cue like a samurai sword and all this stuff.
The syncing up with Warren Zevon. Right?
Yeah.
I do like how people react to him. I mean, that's a little detail, because he's a braggart, right? I mean, he's just an absolute obnoxious jerk. And you get the one top pool player in the Chalkies that.
Grady Seasons.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, not Grady Seasons. That's the guy he plays later on.
Oh, and Chalkies.
Chalkies is
Moselle.
Moselle, right? And when he's playing Moselle, he comes up. What do you got there? And he says Doom, which, fun fact, is the video game. They took
was inspired by
that line.
Yeah, I think I heard that.
But I love the way the actor plays off of that.
Come on, boy. Let's play.
It's just like. Let's go. I mean, it's
just play.
beautiful.
Yeah.
When Helen Shaver shows up as Newman's girlfriend at the end, and after they leave and they tell him how he'd thrown the game. She's like,
He's a little prick.
I love how people are picking up on who he is.
Oh, he is obnoxious. I mean, his character is obnoxious, and his performance is at times too. But it's supposed to be, right? Yeah. And even that scene where he's wearing the T-shirt that says Vince, just adds this other layer of obnoxiousness to it.
Well, I think it is a good performance. It's not a great performance. It's certainly he's way outclassed.
It's very flashy, yeah, for sure.
But if you can see how he was setting up maybe some of the stuff he would do later on, and something like a couple years later, like Rain Man.
Yeah.
Where again he was going toe to toe with some of these more established and veteran
with a firm,
actors. Right.
Yeah.
And he was able to show sort of like, I can believe that this guy is just really a complete flake who works at a kid's toy store selling baby supplies, right?
Yeah.
And then can go from that to being able to play in a pool hall at night and become jealous. I mean, he captures a lot of range, and we should probably talk about Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, plays Carmen.
Very good in this, yeah.
Yeah, also was nominated for an Oscar in this film, and she's a nice foible, for both of them.
Well, we kind of mentioned before, she's the brains of the operation, at least among the two, her and Tom Cruise, right? And she realizes his shortcomings, and she kind of knows how to compensate for them. She has a bit of a, Lady Macbeth is probably too strong a term, but kind of a manipulative quality to her as well.
But you see how Eddie figures that out and,
Yeah.
and breaks that real quickly.
Yep.
She's trying to play the seductress, right? And he just calls it out, and she's like, I'm not moved by this, knock it off.
Yep.
But you can see how she learns, right? She's clearly, I mean, I love that first scene when she has with Eddie.
You want to play him?
Me? Sure.
You really don't want to play me?
20 a rack.
No, 500 a rack.
I can't get it.
Oh, are you serious?
I never kid about money.
And
the way shouldn't, and then you should have, and yeah.
Yeah, and the way she just, a lot of it without dialogue, is just kind of reacting like, what the hell is going on here, right?
I'll offer it to you again. I'll play him for $500.
No.
Actually, you should have said yes.
Well, it's still a very strong picture, and I do think, it probably gets a bad rap unfairly, but I think.
Well, do you think that's partly because it is a Scorsese film? Like, if this was directed not by Martin Scorsese, it's directed by, I don't know who had been a director of the 80s at that time. That
Yeah, the expectations
Roger
are...
Spottiswoode or something like that.
Sure, the expectations are high, right? And part of me also thinks that, maybe Scorsese was intimidated by working with Paul Newman to an extent, right? I mean, I'm sure he's someone that he, felt was a legend at the time. And just the experience of working with him probably was intimidating for him as a director, even as accomplished as a director as he was at that point.
But he was an accomplished director, but he was not what he is now.
Yeah.
I mean, really, not until like Goodfellas and stuff started kind of clicking more in the '90s that he started to become that guy that everyone's like, wow, Scorsese. He could have, if he had maybe bombed another film, had his career just go tank and he's out, right? He's trying to get a commercial made or something.
It's easy to forget that, I guess,
Right.
where he was at this point. But I think it's still worth seeing. It's an interesting companion piece to The Hustler. I do think they do create, an interesting arc for the Eddie Felson character. Even though it's not, the depth isn't what I would want it to be.
Well, I think what I love about the film, and I wouldn't say it's a great film either, right? But I do think that it's fascinating to see what is truly just a commercial project.
Yeah.
But because of the nature of the talent that's making it, whether that's Newman's performance or that's Scorsese's direction or it's Ballhouse's cinematography, right? That there is a creative energy and there are certain decisions that are made that reflect an artistic genius at work.